Wait for my cue while I make the stream go live. You're live.
Good evening and welcome to the Scottsdale Historic Preservation Commission remote public meeting. The purpose of the Historic Preservation Commission, in part, is to establish standards necessary to preserve the historic character.
While I make the stream go live. You're live.
To preserve the historic character of resources designated historic. Historic Preservation Commission remote public meeting. The purpose of the Historic Preservation Commission, in part, is to establish standards necessary to preserve the historic.
While I make the stream go live.
And I think we're hearing, Commissioner Brousseau, I think we're hearing your mic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're live.
To preserve the historic character of resources designated historic. Historic Preservation Commission remote public meeting. Okay. Let's see, where was I? To establish standards necessary to preserve the historic character of resources designated historic, develop, maintain, and from time to time amend significance in the city, and review proposed alterations to historic and archaeological resources through the certificate of appropriateness process. Until further notice, meetings will be held electronically and remotely. While physical facilities are not open to the public, meetings are streamed to the city YouTube channel to allow public to listen, view the meeting in progress. Only written comments submitted electronically are being accepted. To be considered, please submit your written public comment on an agenda item at least 90 minutes before the meeting's scheduled time. The agenda consists of the roll call, administrative report, minutes, approval of the prior meeting, regular agenda and non-agenda items during which no vote will be made by the commission. I remind our audience that the review relates to historic preservation matters and does not include consideration of existing zoning district designations, zoning entitlements, or the allowed uses within the zoning districts. The commissioner's motion may be to approve with modified stipulations, to deny the request, or to continue the case. Thank you for your interest and time. Now we will begin the meeting with the roll call.
Chair Schweiger,
Present.
Vice Chair Davis, absent. Commissioner Brousseau,
Present.
thank you. Commissioner Edmonds,
Present.
Commissioner Fadock, absent. Commissioner Hosmer,
Present.
Commissioner Kinchin.
Present.
Thank you.
The first action of the commission will be the administrative report by Doris McClay.
Doris McClay. Chair Schweigert and commission members, just wanted to keep you up to date. There is a possibility that our August meeting will be held in person. We'll keep you informed on when that decision is made. Our July meeting is canceled. That ends my administrative report. Thank you.
Thank you. The next action of the committee will be the approval of the meeting minutes. Are there any corrections to the minutes by any of the commissioner members? And hold on, I need to. Seeing none, I will entertain a motion. Commissioner Hosmer?
Peter Hosmer, I make a motion to approve the Thursday, May 5th, 2021 meeting minutes.
Commissioner Edmonds, I second.
Thank you. Can we have a roll call vote?
Chair Schweiger,
Approve.
Commissioner Brousseau,
Approved.
Commissioner Edmonds,
Approve.
Commissioner Hosmer,
Approve.
Commissioner Kinchin.
Approve.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the non-action item, the presentation by the Scottsdale Fire and Building Department on safety issues within historic neighborhoods.
Yes, good afternoon, board. This is Michael Clack. I'm the building official for the city of Scottsdale. And in speaking with Mark Zimmerman, I don't know if he's on the call or not, but he was telling me that you all had some concerns or questions regarding burglar bars on houses and that are historic in nature. And it's an item that is found in the building code. And I was just curious as to what specific questions that you have that I might try to answer them. Thank you.
Commissioner Hosmer, I believe you wanted to speak with them. Do you have any direct questions for them at this time?
Yes, Mr. Clack, thank you for joining the meeting. Throughout the history of Villa Monterey specifically, but this applies to all the historic districts. As you can see on the screen, there's a two-story home there, townhome, that has some wrought iron over the windows, or at least partially over the windows. So a couple of things have come to concern for me. And one is when somebody comes in and decides that they want to put a garage door over their garage and their only entrance door is in the garage, not allowing for proper egress from the home. And then secondly, historically, there's been some decorative metal wrought iron grates on the windows, and they aren't always the removable type, they're permanent. And I'm not talking about the ones like we see in the picture here that looks more like a balcony, but that would, the one to the left on the white wall would show that it's bolted to the masonry. So in the event of a fire, there's no, at least to my knowledge, no pins or hinges to allow a person to open the window adequately and get out in an emergency. So what I'd like to see at least is within any modifications being done to a historic property, that all those things have to get waived in favor of life safety. You know, it's our goal to try to keep them intact, make them look like they're historic, like they were. But I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that if they aren't swing open or there isn't a quick release to get somebody out, that's a life safety issue. And of course, I would not be in favor of ever approving a garage door when the only egress is inside the garage. And I just want to make sure that the building department, the planning department, and so forth, as they're looking at plans and the proposal from customers, that they're always aware of those kind of things. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Michael Clack speaking again. And yes, I understand your concerns, and thank you for having the slide up there. It helps me to visualize exactly what you're talking about. And so let me speak first of all to the garage doors. Yes, it does appear that the entry into the house would be a door in the garage or carport, however you want to phrase it. Particularly, let's use the tan townhome that has the looks like it's a for sale sign right in front of it. And so, yeah, you would, as I understand the building code, a garage door would not be appropriate there because it would take special effort to get out of the house in the event of a fire, and somebody would have to exit quickly. So that would not, unless it had a personnel door built in to the garage door, which would be very unsightly. You could not have that because that's not a proper exit as the building code prescribes. As far as the bars or the decorative wrought iron that's on the building, and let's take a look at that one that's up on the second floor. That is something just at first glance I would have questions about whether or not that is in compliance with the code, because I'm thinking that that window up there leads to a bedroom, and if that is a bedroom, the code is very specific that you have to have an emergency escape rescue opening. And the code has specifics as far as what the clearance of the window is, as far as dimensions, how high off of the floor the sill has to be, and it has to be easily opened without any special knowledge or effort or any sort of device to open it. And it seems like the hindrance would be that wrought iron that's right underneath there. Even though it doesn't cover up the whole window, it does not appear to be in compliance with the code, especially if it is a sleeping room or a bedroom. If it's not a bedroom, if it's a living room, then it would be acceptable. But just from my understanding of buildings and architecture and things of that nature, that tells what I'm seeing there is most likely a bedroom window coming out of there, and so that would not be allowed. You have to keep in mind that it's not just for somebody to exit out of the building in the event of a fire, but it's also to allow the fire department to have access by the fire department personnel if they need to get in there. And that's why the code has very specific dimensions as to those openings, because it's based on a study that they did in San Diego many years ago, where they had a firefighter who was fully dressed with all of his equipment, air tank and all that, and what size opening it would allow him to have access in a situation like that. So I hope that answers your questions. Thank you.
This is Peter Hosmer again. Mr. Clack, thank you again for clarifying that. I think what I'm looking for is an awareness of the rest of the commission when we see these cases, so that we're all aware of this. In addition, so that it doesn't have to come to us to make a decision on it if the planner's reviewing the cases before somebody comes in with a building permit, that those things are addressed up front so that we don't have to deal with it. And I certainly would find it acceptable if there's a method that the fire department would allow some kind of single action, quick pin, and this is something that the building code and you as the building official, Mr. Black, would have to approve, how you could get a quick release on a piece of wrought iron to swing open. The problem there is, from a security standpoint, if you put it on the outside, then a burglar could find it and open it. I think we need to be open that if somebody wants to try to find a method that works, we'd let them bring that to you, the building official, for approval. And that's really all I have. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. This is Michael Clack again. Yes, I have some experience with the quick release type of burglar bars that are compliant with the code and that also provide some security. So I know that those types of things exist. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sim. Oh, yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah, and also just so you know, this is something, and I'll bring this up with my staff too, because these items are found in the building code, and I would have staff take a look at the building code if they are made aware on the plans that there is a wrought iron covering or proposed, or even if it's existing, we would take a look at that. Take a look at the scope of the work, and it depends on how aggressive we want to get here in Scottsdale if we want to have those burglar bars removed. I don't think it has really come up as an issue here. One of the things you got to keep in mind is most houses built since 1985 have been sprinklered. I doubt that these houses are sprinklered. And so there is a limit as to how much you can do before you have to bring the entire home up to code. So definitely we would not allow any new burglar bars to be installed unless it met the building code requirements.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zimmerman. Are there any questions from the rest of the commission? Okay, I see none. Thank you so much. The next item on the agenda is a presentation by the Capital Projects to discuss proposed improvements to the west entry to the Civic Center, which includes the area in front of the Little Red Schoolhouse.
All right. All right, I'll take it from here. Hello, my name is Brandon Sobiak from Dig Studio. Thank you for the time this evening, commissioners, appreciate it. As we flip through the package, there are plenty of pages and items to go through. We've actually formatted this where we can give a kind of brief discussion on the overall extent of the improvements, as obviously there are improvements adjacent to the library, City Hall, kind of campus wide, and then at the end focus in on the west corridor, where we can get into a little bit more fine-tuned detail on what's happening around that the historic schoolhouse and how grade changes will kind of change that entry experience. With that, we can flow to the next slide, please. Thank you. Right, and just as a refresher, some history of this project. This was a project that started back in 2015 through 2018 with the Municipal Site Use Master Plan, which led to the bond passing, and this project that we'll talk about today and the improvements that we'll talk about today. And just to let you know, this is in part of the public process right now. The presentations, a longer one of what you'll see today is posted online, along with detailed presentations of all the specific kind of study areas throughout. So if there's anything else of interest within this presentation that you'd like to continue to learn more about, all of that information is now posted online. Next slide, please. And again, I apologize, we'll say next quite a bit in this presentation because there are a lot of slides, but felt it was important to kind of give a broad overview of the project. So from that municipal site master plan, you know, there were principles that came out of that community engagement that we carried forward as design goals for this project. One of them was really to honor history and understand the significance of the current plan, of the institutions that are kind of called the Civic Center home. That includes the Scottsdale Historical Museum. It includes City Hall, Library, Performing Arts, and all those institutions. And then with that, combining this new kind of infrastructure to support, you know, what will become an entertainment destination and a daily use park. Next slide, please. So really, and I think this plays into the historic aspect of the park. When you kind of try to understand a space that's existing, it has a life of its own already. It's important not only to look at, you know, what needs improvement, but also what's working well and what can be built upon. And so our design team really started with this approach of preservation and then enhancement, and then areas that can be completely transformed. Really kind of building on the great infrastructure of trees and architecture that exists on site. Next slide, please. And what that did is broke down, as we kind of looked at these study areas with the adjacent context in the program, broke the site down into 5 study areas. We'll briefly go over each one of them, and then, like I said, at the end, we'll touch base in a little bit more depth on the West Paseo. The West Paseo is that connection from Main Street into the West Bowl. The West Bowl is that area and that lawn just north of the Center of Performing Arts. The Civic lawn spans over Drinkwater Boulevard Bridge, is adjacent to City Hall. And then a new kind of family amenity area called the Social Hub is stitched in between City Hall and the Public Library and offers more of those kind of family-focused daily activities. And then finally, the East Bowl along North 75th Street is kind of that performance and entertainment destination. Next slide, please. So just quickly to touch on kind of the framework of the plan, it really was taking influence from these institutions that surrounded, the Civic Center, and engaging it with three main kind of programmatic areas that really played to the program and how to extend those institutions out into the space. So from the West Bowl with its connection to the Center of Performing Arts, the East Bowl with its connection to, looking out the windows of the Scottsdale Public Library, and then the Civic Lawn that really works to engage and kind of tie together the civic nature of the City Hall, the public nature of the library, and the art and cultural aspect of performing arts. Next slide. Next slide, please. And then from there were these other layers of program, that really responded to these community desires of, children's garden outside the library to bring that daily activity, water plazas, community plazas that could be programmed in a variety of ways. And then as it pertains to the West Paseo, this kind of entry room that allows people and really pulls people in from Main Street to create a gathering spot at that node. Next slide, please. And then built on from that, and you'll see that around the Historical Society, is this extension of these other, adjacencies. So looking at, potential expansion of green space where that current parking lot is, where the schoolyard rectangle is located, and then offering kind of a formal gathering space outside of the museum steps and what we're calling the square. And then as you get into the major, kind of the bigger park area, really reimagining that Marshall Gardens area with this Desert Southwest kind of overlay, showcase of our native palette within the Botanic Gardens, and then these other kind of social gathering areas that are adjacent to the institutions. Next slide, please. And then from there, it was about connecting out. One of the main goals of this project was to increase those connections, both internally, but then also enhance kind of that access externally from the park, both to the east, west, and also to the south, to the existing parking garage and 2nd Street. Next slide, please. So here you see kind of the plan in its form as it currently stands, with those three programmatic areas kind of anchoring the park. Their shape is really taken and pulled from the turquoise gem, which relates into the arts of Old Town and allows us to kind of be organic with our moves and really respond to a lot of the existing elements that are out in the space. Next slide, please. And here you can see a view from the southeast looking to the northwest. In each of, it's a little hard to see on the screen, but each of the, we're currently working with Public Arts right now as well, looking at the refurbishment and relocation of several of the sculptures that exist out today, as well as working with public artists on bridge installation on underneath the tunnel. Next slide, please. And you can see here that the Winfield Scott Memorial is kept essentially within its same location and adjacency to the museum, actually aligned and centered on the doors. And then the yearlings as well are similarly located, just pulled back to not become a barrier, but actually to kind of have that focal draw back into the park. Next slide, please. So the West Paseo, we'll touch on the design goals here briefly, and then, like I said, at the end, we'll get into a little bit more of the detail around the historical museum. But the design goals really for this space and what we heard was basically, increase access, both visual. So from the corner of Main Street and Brown, you can understand that there's a park beyond, there's something happening within the space, and that it would draw you in. So the big move here was to really lower grade, bring it back to its original kind of the road grade or parking lot. So as you access in, you're not met with ramps, you're not met with barriers, not met with walls. You have clear and free pedestrian access. It also opens up a lot more opportunities for programming from markets, festivals, and then off the steps of the Historical Museum in terms of speaking engagements, lectures, that sort of thing. Next slide, please. As you move further east into the park, you come to the West Bowl, which was really about preservation of an amenity area that's really working well. It's got the large forest of trees. It has a beautifully sculpted lawn. It has this nice adjacency to the performing arts with that kind of program relationship. And then with the Marshall Gardens, it was taking that geometry and really working with that, but having this kind of Southwest desert overlay on it to bring it to life a bit and add some more vibrancy and color and showcase that desert palette. And then in the center there, you see a 360 structure that is actually engaging with those existing banyan trees that anchor the center of the site. And that really creates this dynamic community space right in the heart of the park that's able to, kind of activate the West Bowl, activate that civic lawn, and then also create a great gathering area internally as well. Next slide, please. So here's just a shot of that Marshall Gardens with the step down. We were actually within this kind of design and opening it up, provide better visual access for this area and provide better physical access as well. Next slide, please. And here's a shot from underneath that forest of trees, looking back at the two banyan trees with that 360 structure that kind of wraps it. And there's special attention kind of paid to how these, by our design partners like Plato, in terms of how these structures kind of interacted with the space and interacted with the surrounding architecture. There was an intention that all of these are very organic in their forms, complementary, not mimicking kind of the historic institutions that are on site, and graceful kind of within their forms and how they stitch into the landscape. Next slide, please. So as you get to the civic lawn, this has that kind of overall bridge connection over Drinkwater, stitches into City Hall. As you can see in the foreground of that upper picture, the lagoons are kept to maintain that kind of view up to City Hall with the bridge. However, they are reduced in their size on the south. That's kind of twofold. One, water conservation was a big part of this project, understanding how we could reduce turf area, reduce water feature, solve maintenance issues through this project. And that also opened up a large area kind of south of the lagoons and north of the library that could really be occupied with more community amenity areas like splash play and reading garden and playground. Next slide, please. And here you can see kind of the new stitching in with what's out there existing from that central 360 canopy area, looking out over that civic lawn. The Love statue is relatively within the same location, still has that backdrop of City Hall and the backdrop of Camelback, depending on which way you're taking that photo. But here you can see the City Hall to the left and the library to the right, with a new East Bowl canopy, which we'll show in a moment, down this alley. So it's kind of have this formality that links and connects the east portion of the park to the central portion of the park, which was a goal of the project to make that connection a little bit better, because right now with the grading and with that kind of bunker restroom, you're a little lost in terms of understanding that amenity exists on that side of the park. Next slide, please. So here's that, what we're doing, the social hub, really building off of the program of the library and letting that extend out into the space to become that kind of great family gathering area. The library is looking at having that kind of back entrance turned into a permanent entrance that spills out right into the children's garden. The children's garden would have kind of a reading tree area, an area to grab a book and kind of lounge and be outside and have those story times and those types of activities occur out there. And then there would be a play element integrated in that as well. That's stitched over to the Water and Fog Plaza with the Grove, which is more about picnicking and gathering. The Water and Fog Plaza is a splash feature that's located within the southern footprint of that previous lagoon. It brings interactivity with water and a chance to cool down, and all that water is actually reclaimed back into the site to refill those lagoons and go into the landscape. There's also a fog element with it that kind of combines this arts and culture influence with water to create kind of this performance event that also cools the space and creates kind of an attraction and a draw for the area. Next slide, please. So here you can see that view out of what would be those new library doors into the green space, very playful space, a lot of integrated seating to make it comfortable for adults, kids, fully accessible play area with a lot of inclusive and sensory items to really create a unique and immersive experience. Next slide, please. And here's that spot underneath the shade structure with the water plaza to the right. You can see the terraces have, we're looking at creating kind of these artistic bookends on those terraces that exist out today to bring some of that color and play with kind of the great sunlight that we get in our Arizona desert. And here you can see from this vantage point the connection of the splash, the love statue, the 360 structure, and Camelback in the distance. Next slide, please. And finally, over at the East Bowl, this is really about creating permanence to a program that exists out there today. Replacing that temporary stage setup with a permanent stage in canopy, kind of transitioning from water use with the existing water feature to water collection. This whole kind of entry off of 75th will be transformed into a more native desert palette. The performance canopy is actually designed to capture and collect water, filter it through the landscape, and become an educational opportunity, for the residents, for visitors to understand, water use within our climate. Next slide, please. And there's also special attention kind of paid to the scale of the space as well. As it's acting as a performance pavilion out to the green and kind of towards the library. But on its backside, or it's really the 75th side, as we're saying, because it's designed to not have kind of a back, it scales down to the neighborhood to create kind of this nice entrance experience that you walk through as you enter into the park. Next slide, please. And then it has this ability to transform from that daily use into this entertainment destination that can support those events. Next slide, please. All right, so that was kind of a quick overview of the entire thing. And like I said, I apologize if I went fast. There's a lot of detailed information again, and happy to answer any questions after this presentation as well. But diving into the West Paseo, I apologize, some of the text looks like it's a little off, but this captures again that area from Main Street and Brown into the West Bowl area, and kind of hugs, like you can see, the historical museum. So next slide, please. Here's an enlargement plan of that zone where you can see the Scottsdale Historical Museum with the what we're calling kind of little museum square out front of the steps. Again, this whole area is flattened. The Winfield Scott Memorial remains within its place, but actually centered on the doorway. And then there's an opportunity for expanded green space over to the west of the museum. The existing large trees right now will remain, that large eucalyptus to the right, and then the three large trees that kind of frame that schoolyard space. And then what you see off of Main Street and Brown is this idea of an entry room, kind of pulling that new Main Street landscape palette into the west corridor here, and creating a place to gather, a place for small performances, for buskers, for kind of that daily activity that activates it, and that seasonal transformations that occur. So having seasonal lighting, having a place for the tree to set up, all those types of things would happen within that entry room. And then you can see the yearlings also kind of pulled back. So still a visual draw from Brown and Main Street, but then also a nice connection from the steps of the museum, and also a connection, nice kind of visual tie to the parking lots to the north and south. So it's something to kind of draw you in and welcome you into the space. Next slide, please. And here you can see kind of diagrammatically how those programs set up. So you do have this nice promenade that cuts through, that can be transformed into these markets and these different festivals with, given the kind of new simplified ground plane, it really does allow for, better tent setup, better vendor setup, better setup in general for those kind of weekend activities. There will be, Wi-Fi throughout the park as part of this, as well as plugins to help facilitate, those vendors and those types of activities. Next slide, please. So here you can see in perspective of how the museum kind of fits into that space with these turquoise-shaped kind of planters that dot through that showcase, either highlight an existing tree, showcase a desert palette, provide a place for art to sit that you can see the yearlings in, And then there's this little formal square out front of the steps of the History Museum that provides that area for tent setup and those lecture and other types of events that occur out front. And even with those steps, there'll be 2 ramps that kind of flank the steps that allow access from both the east and the west, and allow an accessible entrance up to those doors. Next slide, please. And I think you'll be able to see that very shortly. So this is an evening view from Brown and Main, looking in, creating that volume of space beyond the banyan tree. The idea is to create some type of artistic kind of shade element that draws you in and starts to create a space for things to happen. Next slide, please. And this is from the basically standing over by the steps of the museum, looking back over towards Brown. So the schoolyard has this kind of terrace step up to create kind of like an informal amphitheater space, lecture space, performance space. And then you can see how the grade is flattened out, again, to have better views and better physical accessibility through the space. Next slide, please. And here's a shot of basically standing over kind of by the interior design store and the wine shop across the corridor, looking back at the museum with those steps up, and you can see on both sides. So you have kind of ramp access that go up. We were able to meet with a couple of the museum staff and committee members. I'm not sure if any of those folks are on today. And kind of show, through visualization how this would appear and how this would be transformed. So from today's grade, you can see how this drops down about 3 to 3.5 feet. And really what it does, it brings the museum back to kind of having that prominence that it once had. If you look at the, historic photos of the steps and, it does actually become kind of that gathering space in front of the museum, which is nice. For context, you can see the planting and the flagpole that exists today. And then one thing that did come from that meeting with the Historical Society is understanding kind of the programmatic needs for those small events that happen in front of the museum. So some of the turf that you see will actually be transitioned into permeable pavers to allow for just kind of better tent and event setup kind of floor for those things to happen. Next slide, please. And here's just a quick section of how that would work, understanding again that grade change. No improvements are planned for kind of the backside of the historical museum, just the front side. So that little crossing over kind of that sunken area would remain, and then our improvements would tie to that and basically create an elevated plaza and then have steps down to the main corridor. What that would do is also give a nice kind of, have those monumental steps and have a nice podium for speakers and those lecture type events that could occur out front. Next slide, please. Here's just another aerial of how those improvements would work with the existing trees and framing that space. And I believe, next slide. That is it for that. And then just a quick overview of the schedule. So right now we're in public outreach. Construction is scheduled to begin October 2021. And then with everything fully reopening January 2023, December 2022. And please note that working with our contractor, we do anticipate pedestrian access through this corridor being maintained through the construction process. They'll kind of flip-flop sides as they work through construction. And next slide, please. I believe that is a wrap. So I don't know if we want to go back to one of the slides that show kind of those West Paseo entry, maybe that one that kind of shows the overview or the plan view. If anybody has any questions, I would be happy to, or comments, I'd be happy to take those. Thank you again for the time.
Commissioner Hosmer has a question.
I don't really have a question, Peter Hosmer, more just a compliment, because going to that museum, I felt like it was the back door of something. The entrance off of Main was so congested. You've opened it up. You've celebrated the entry by basically putting a grand set of stairs up there, and I think it gives it a lot more importance. So I just commend you on what you're doing, and it's nice to see that the 20 or 30 remodels that have happened to the Civic Center over the decades, this is pulling it all together, and I love seeing this. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Are there any other comments or questions from the commission? Okay, I see none. Thank you so much for such a wonderful presentation. It's very exciting.
Thank you for taking the time. Appreciate it.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is the regular agenda item. Oh, goodness. My light in my room isn't very bright, so. 48 HP 2021, the hall roof replacement. Let's see. I don't know who will be speaking to that, but that is the next item.
Thank you, Historic Preservation Commission. This is Ben Moriarty. I'm the coordinator for that case. I'll just give it a moment for the presentation to come onto your screen.
Sorry, I'm having just a moment, just a second. Is it sharing, Ben?
I don't see it yet, but I'll
Okay,
start, and then we could catch up with the presentation when it does pop up.
thank you.
Again, my name is Ben Moriarty. I'm a senior planner with the planning department here, and I'm the coordinator for the hall resident re-roofing case, number 48 HP 2021. Oh, there it is. Perfect. Thank you, Karen. This slide shows the aerial of the site. It's within the Sands North Townhome development, and it is south of East Indian Bend Road and east of North Scottsdale Road. You could see that the McCormick-Stillman Railroad Park wraps this development. Next slide, please. This is a closer bird's eye view of the site. Just west of it is the community building and pool for the Sands North townhomes. Next slide, please. The site is zoned townhome residential with a historic property overlay, or R4R HP. And you can see it's on the south side of East Joshua Tree Lane, in between North 72nd Place and North 73rd Street. Next slide, please. This site plan illustrates the roof area that's that needs to be resurfaced or redone on this property. And it's hatched in that blue color. Next slide, please. These are existing condition photos. You'll note that the front of the home has the wood elements that in some cases appear as fascia. Those elements will need to be refurbished as well, but they will be refurbished to be representing or matching the historic image of the townhome. The rest of the roof will be resurfaced and repairs done as needed, but the appearance from the street will remain the same. Next slide, please. The applicant received two quotes for the re-roofing project. One quote was $3,430 and the other was $6,552.88. Next slide, please. So the request before you today is for the certificate of appropriateness for the re-roofing project and the HRER program funding. Next slide, please. That concludes staff's presentation. The applicant is also on the line if you have any questions regarding this project. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moriarty. Are there any questions from the commission? Commissioner Hosmer?
Peter Hosmer. Mr. Moriarty, I noticed that there was quite a discrepancy in the cost between the two vendors. And not that that's any of my problem, but I would just suggest to the homeowner that when you get an imbalance on quotes, get one until you get a match so that you know that you're in the ballpark, because roofers are, you know, there's such a variety of quality in roofing. And because this is just resurfacing the roof, I really want this homeowner to get the best value out of it. And it may be the more expensive one is the way to go, but getting a third quote would certainly button up the decision about whether to go high or low. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I can entertain a motion. Commissioner Hosmer?
I'll start with the certificate of appropriateness. I make a motion to approve case number 48 HP 2021 for the certificate of appropriateness for historic resources.
Do I have Commissioner Kinchin? Is that a second?
Yes, Commissioner Kinchin, and I second that.
Thank you. Can we have a roll call vote?
Chair Schweiger,
Yes.
Commissioner Brousseau,
Yes.
Commissioner Edmonds,
Yes.
Commissioner Hosmer,
Yes.
Commissioner Kinchin.
Yes.
Thank you.
That takes us to the next regular agenda item 6, 55 HP 2021, the Kimsey Building Historic Preservation Plan.
Excuse me, Chair, can we do a motion for the HRER funding?
Thank you for catching that for me. I got so excited. Okay, can I have a motion, Mr. Commissioner Hosmer?
Yes, thank you. Peter Hosmer. I'll make the motion for case number 48 HP 2021 for the approval of historic residential exterior rehabilitation HRER program funding. Thank you.
Commissioner Kinchin?
I second that.
Okay, roll call on the HRER funding?
Chair Schweiger,
Yes.
Commissioner Brousseau,
Yes.
Commissioner Edmonds,
Yes.
Commissioner Hosmer,
Yes.
Commissioner Kinchin.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now it's agenda item 6, 55 HP 2021, the Kimsey Building Historic Preservation Plan.
Good evening, Chair Schweiger and members of the commission. This is Brian Clough with the city's planning department. I'll be giving you a brief overview of the Kimsey proposal here. And it looks like we got the slides up. So this is a request for approval of the historic preservation plan for the Kimsey building, case 55 HP 2021. Next slide, please. So the site location we're looking at is on the north side of Indian School Road, and it is west of Scottsdale Road and east of Goldwater Boulevard. Next slide, please. This is a closer look at the site, and it is part of a larger development that includes redevelopment of the Howard Johnson Hotel to the west, as well as the venue building to the north, and the specific Kimsey building highlighted in yellow is the subject of the plan tonight, which recently received a historic preservation overlay. Next slide, please. This is the existing zoning on the site now, showing downtown multiple use type 2, also in the plan block development district, in the downtown overlay, and the historic property designation. Next slide. So the specific request tonight is for approval of the historic preservation plan and design guidelines for the Kimsey building that's located at 7110 East Indian School Road. Next slide. So earlier this year on February 2nd, the Historic Preservation Commission did review the case and recommended approval of the historic preservation designation, as well as the draft historic preservation plan that was presented at that time. And then April 6th of this year, the City Council approved the historic preservation, the historic property designation, along with that draft historic preservation plan. Next slide. Just for context, this is the site plan that was approved for the Kimsey project that shows the redevelopment that will occur around the Kimsey building. So with the hotel to the north and residential to the east that also wraps around to the north. And highlighted in green there is the location of the Kimsey building and the surrounding site. So the Kimsey building was designed by Ralph Haver in 1961 and constructed in 1962. It's a 2-story building that's approximately 16,000 square feet. Currently, there are a mix of commercial and service related uses within the structure. Next slide, please. So before you this evening is the historic preservation plan, which has been provided in its entirety as part of your packet. And the applicant will be going into a little bit more detail as to the contents of the plan. And in accordance with the historic property overlay, the historic preservation plan is coming before the commission for final approval and adoption of the historic preservation plan. Next slide, please. That concludes staff's presentation. As I mentioned, the applicant has a presentation prepared, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have for staff. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and listen to the applicant presentation at this time.
Doug Sidnor here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go ahead and proceed. Well, thank you, Chair Schweiger and Commissioners for having us here this evening. Again, I am Doug Sidnor. I'm an architect representing the Kimsey Development Project team, and specifically the architectural consultant of Gensler and Sidnor. Joining me today, and who will be co-presenting, is Don Ryden of Ryden Architects. They're an architectural firm specializing in historic preservation projects and consultations throughout Arizona for over 40 years. Don and his team is the lead author of the Kimsey Historic Preservation Plan and Design Guidelines that we will be discussing. Next, please. Before diving into the particulars, a reminder that historical and cultural preservation represents a responsibility of Scottsdale citizens to maintain unique and significant structures for the enjoyment of future generations, and all per the 2001 voter approved general plan. Next. We would like to put into context where our team has been over the past 15 months, where we are currently, and where we see ourselves going in the next few months. As you know, the entitlements were approved at the 3 commissions noted, including yourselves, and also City Council. Again, we're currently here before all of you to discuss, review, comment on the historic preservation plan and design guidelines. The next few weeks and months, we're going before the Development Review Board with a full design packet. That'll be followed by us visiting the Scottsdale Arts Public Art Advisory Board to discuss the first stage of the preliminary public art plan. We will also visit them a couple more times in the months ahead. And then we're off to Development Services applying for a full building permit. And with that, we hope that we can break ground in the spring of 2022. Construction will also take until we predict late 2024. Next. And you may remember that our story really began with William and Elizabeth Kimsey. They came here some 110 years ago from Indiana. They literally sold the farm, purchased 5 acres, built 3 homes here, and planted a citrus orchard. Next. And they had 3 children, including Mort Kimsey, who's in this image to the lower right, and it's where he's serving on the first city council after the community was incorporated in 1951. And he also went on to become our second mayor in 1958 through 1962. He, along with his father, had many firsts that the community's been benefiting from since then. For example, Mort was one of the founding members of the Scottsdale Historical Society. Next. The Kimsey family then struck in 1960 a 50-year lease of the property with Butler Homes. They then demolished the original Kimsey residence that once sat here in 1961. At that same time, they commissioned the well-known architect Ralph Haver to design the Kimsey building, and then construction was underway and completed the following year in 1962. Since then, there have been dozens of tenants over the years, including our own City Hall from 1963 to 1968. Next. Through this process, we've researched into the body of Ralph Haver's architecture in Scottsdale. We believe that Mr. Haver and his firm designed some 15 projects. Unfortunately, 5 of those have been demolished over the years. So what we have before us is really a unique, rare opportunity to save a significant commercial project by a very skilled and talented mid-century modern architect. Next. We also took a look at the surrounding context to take an inventory of the architectural character and the palette of materials that were being used, so that we might consider all of those in the new redevelopment project. Next. Also wanted to bring you current with our latest rendering, which shows the Kimsey building here in the foreground and the new residential to the left of it, as well as a backdrop to the historic structure. Next. Also wanted to very briefly highlight a partial list of the entitlements that were approved, so you're brought current with that. We did in fact have 190 residential units approved, 160 guest rooms at the hotel. The building height was set at 6 stories or 76 feet, which does include all the mechanical devices. The hotel has additional setbacks over on 3rd Avenue. And also we did preserve a mid-block pedestrian public access way in perpetuity, which is on the east edge of the property. Next. And number 6 is very important to you in that the historic property designation for the Kimsey building will carry on permanently. And its footprint of the building is included along with its open space in front of it. Also, the last item, which evolved in recent weeks, is a notion of a community room and gallery within the Kimsey building. Next. And this is just a quick image that we produced. It's about 1,000 square feet. It's on the first level. It's on the east half of the Kimsey building, and it will be publicly accessible and open during all the regular open hours of the development. And there'll be rotating and permanent exhibits that particularly focus on the Kimsey family and Haver architecture within that space. Next. Also, just a reminder of the conceptual site plan that's been evolving. There's been some refinements since you saw it last. The hotel in purple has shifted a touch to the south. And then there have been many other refinements. And of course, the Kimsey building is noted there in the blue. Next. And as Mr. Clough had shown, we're showing in this site plan drawing to the lower right or the southeast corner, the red dashed line, which defines the historic property, which includes, again, the footprint of the historic building and the open space in front of it. Next. At this time, I'm going to hand off the presentation to Don Ryden to kind of walk us through the highlights of the Historic Preservation Plan and Design Guidelines. Don?
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm very glad to be here to share with you the findings of our investigations and the predictions for the future. So, as you probably all know, historic preservation plans are really not about freeze drying buildings in the past, but it's really more about respectful change management today for continued use tomorrow. People involved with renewing important old buildings have lots of different interests, risks, goals, and responsibilities, and yet they really do have to come together and agree about the treatment of buildings within nationally accepted preservation principles. So we've created this historic preservation plan and design guideline document as a vehicle for understanding, planning, evaluating, and succeeding in rehabilitating the Kimsey building. Our archival research, our building assessment, and the code check that we performed has informed the preparation of this document. Its guidance is going to comply with the Secretary of Interior's standards, and it's interlocked with the International Building Code as mitigated by the International Existing Building Code. So we know that clarity, continuity, and correctness are vital for presenting the intent of this plan and making your job as the Preservation Commission easier. So for the benefit of all, we've defined historic preservation terms and treatments. Next slide, please. We all realize that this report is more than a report. It's actually a legal document that's tied to zoning entitlements to the property. So this plan has been created on the city's policy basis. It's written to encourage rehabilitation creativity within the limitations or opportunities of preservation standards. The plan is organized for you in a hierarchy of principles in layers of standards, policies, guidelines, and recommendations. The document will be the foundation for the appropriateness review process by this commission. Next slide, please. Architect Ralph Haver designed the Kimsey building as being made for change by retail business tenants. The two-story building is a structural framework within an open shell that actually welcomes internal modification. Its spatial concept and underlying patterns are of equal importance to its contemporary style characteristics. It's really quite remarkable to actually have a historic building that was meant to be changed. This is one of these rare cases.
1 minute warning.
Okay, so to help plan and evaluate changes, we identify the relative importance of the building features and patterns. Next, please. For the policies and guidelines, we have 5 essential HP policies to embrace broad characteristics: welcoming open site, iconic building massing, signature facade features, modern spatial concepts, and inherent design elements. We put these together for you with clear statements of must, should, and may actions. Next. The recommendations address each element of the site, the building exterior, interior, structure, and the building systems. Preservation treatments will stabilize features, repair or replace deficiencies, and replace missing parts. Rehabilitation approaches will explain the appropriate modification for adaptive uses through additions and alterations. Next. And here is an example of an appropriate adaptive use design per the preservation guidelines. This is a recently remodeled office suite in the Kimsey building, and it's a very good example of appropriate adaptive use. Its modifications respect the architectural elements, spatial concepts, and underlying design patterns. So please join us in promoting the Greater Kimsey Residential Hotel Development Project by approving our Historic Preservation Plan and Guidelines as the legal document that will assure sensitive change management now and in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ryden. Are there any questions from the commission? Commissioner Hosmer. Commissioner Hosmer, do you have a question or comment?
Yes, this may be a question for Mr. Ryden. It's pertaining to the schedule. The DR and construction schedule that was mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, was that for the entire project or just for the building that we're talking about this evening?
Commissioner Hosmer, I probably should answer that. Doug Sidnor here. That's for the entire project.
Okay. Okay. The reason why I was asking was because I was curious about jurisdiction over design review. You know, if we're looking at this from a historical, you know, how does this mesh with the city's design review board? My next comment or question would go to, I guess, to both of you about the roof equipment. As you know, the last time we discussed this, I'm concerned about the mechanical systems and them being on the roof and it being visible from the hotel down and also from the street view. And in guideline 2.4, it talks about they should not be placed on the roof, but if there's no economical place to put it, you know, I just wondered what kind of thoughts you guys have had on how we can screen or make these things look like they disappear. Any
Doug,
comment?
do you want to take that one about the good news?
Well, Commissioner Hosmer, Mr. Ryden and I have talked about that in the past, and our thinking is reflected in the document before you. Their intention is to not place any mechanical equipment on the roof of the Kimsey building. The bias is to, wherever technically and functionally possible, integrate it within the shell of the existing structure. And most of it would probably gravitate toward the northern end of each half of the building. So we would, that's our intention. That does not mean there may not be some exception that finds its way out to the site, but it's the spaces surrounding it are very public and heavily used. So it would be done very, very sensitively and integrated and definitely not be easily viewed.
Okay, well, I know you guys have the greatest respect for how to handle that. I just want to make sure that you know, that doesn't become a problem down the road. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kinchin?
Hello, Commissioner Kinchin here, and I would like to make a motion to approve 55-HP-2021, the Historic Preservation Plan and Design Guidelines for the Kimsey Building.
Thank you. And I would like to second that as Blair Schweiger, the chair of the commission. May we have the roll call vote?
Chair Schweiger,
Yes.
Commissioner Brousseau,
Yes.
Commissioner Edmonds,
Yes.
Commissioner Hosmer,
Yes.
Commissioner Kinchin.
Enthusiastic yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a very great presentation. We
Okay.
appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for the approval.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that takes us to agenda item 7, the Karen, is there a presentation on this, or is this just for discussion?
There is a presentation. Are you not seeing it?
I wasn't sure, so I just thought I'd ask.
Is there something on the screen right now?
Yeah, I can see Scottsdale North.
Perfect.
Hello?
Hi, Roger.
I'm here. Okay, I can hear you now.
Yes, whenever you're ready to begin,
Okay.
please do.
We have, as the task in front of you tonight is to approve the eligibility and of this nomination to the National Register and make a recommendation to the State Historic Sites Review Committee that the nomination is correct and eligible so it can move forward to the State Sites Review Committee. And as the consultant who prepared the nomination for Scottsdale North with my colleague Donna Reiner, I just wanted to introduce you to Scottsdale North in a way that you may not have seen before. And if anybody hasn't gone through here, I certainly encourage you to do that. You could drive through it in a minute. I encourage you to walk through it because it's delightful. Next. When you get in there, you'll find this residential scale of 1- and 2-story units, all of which are in this interesting Mexican Spanish colonial style, derived from Alamos, Mexico, which was the impetus for the developer Eldon Stemgem to design a Mexican village in Scottsdale as part of his cluster development. Next. 1-story, 2-story versions, all of which have a very interesting surface texture as if they are emulating Adobe, and they have an articulated roof line and a central entry with some very interesting wrought iron gates. And many of those gates are actually imported from Alamos, Mexico, and are used in the development. We'll get there in a minute. Next. And there we go. Wrought iron gates and wrought iron doors and wood doors imported from Alamos or made by a craftsman that they brought with them to do this. I'm not sure what we have next. Next. I'm going to pause here and talk about the real significance that you read about in the nomination of Scottsdale North as an example of cluster housing, if you will. Cluster housing that was an alternative to single-family land use, single-family houses emerging in Phoenix and in Scottsdale, the late 50s and into the 1960s to become the land use movement that really took hold in the early 60s in Scottsdale, and we see it played out in many other developments, as in Sands North, we'll talk about later. Cluster housing gave them the opportunity to have this wonderful open space on the green, and next slide, which most of the houses do open up to the back to the public space, which is a great benefit, far different than you would have gotten in a single family housing development. And when the developer, Eldon Stemgem, proposed this, the Scottsdale Planning Commission in 1968 encouraged him to retain the character of the citrus grove that was there before and retain some of the citrus trees. So the citrus tree is symbolic, if you will, of what this new land use planning concept of cluster housing allowed them to do in terms of articulating the prior landscape. Next, and that may be my last slide. As we go into the nomination, which you have in front of you at length, talking about cluster housing. I know you had it in the agenda if you don't have it in front of you. Talking about the emergence of cluster housing as a planning construct, both in Phoenix and Scottsdale in the 60s, really starting with Villa Monterey in 1961 as cluster housing, and the ability to put more houses, per acre without using so much land and not single family, because suddenly there was this market for, if you will, condominiums, whether it's retirement, whether it's lock and leave, whether it's just a whole different shift emerging in late 50s, early 60s as a different land use pattern that turned into what we now call townhouses or condominiums, whichever term you want to use. And we nominated this Scottsdale North because it is an example of cluster housing that relates to this larger planning construct of a different alternative to the single family house. And that's what the nomination discusses at length, and why it came as that, and then what it looks like. We had we literally did have, we have an image of every unit in Scottsdale North, commenting on the integrity. All of them are deemed contributing because there's nothing that really detracts from. All of them have signature details, roof lines, doorways, the wrought iron gates, and the service texture in some way add to this ensemble that really does have this Mexican village, Spanish village theme that comes from literally 19th, 17th, 18th, 19th century origins in Spain that are visible if you go to Alamos, Mexico, or Google that. You see Alamos and then you see Scottsdale North, and you see what they tried to create as a very interesting architectural image that I don't think is anywhere else in Scottsdale, and certainly not anywhere else, or not anywhere else in Arizona. So it's unique. And we worked with the board of directors of Scottsdale North. I believe you have a letter of support from Scott Simpson or Brad Anderson representing the Homeowners Association, standing solidly behind the idea of nominating Scottsdale North to the National Register. And the nomination is up for your review and comment. I will defer to your judgment now. Questions?
Thank you so much. Commissioner Kinchin.
Hi, Commissioner Kinchin here, and I just wanted to thank Roger and Donna for their hard work on this and that presentation. And I was actually able to walk the Scottsdale North community with Roger and Doris and city staff, and was very impressed. And myself, I would be in support of sending a note to SHPO regarding it, being viable on the National Register. I think it's an incredible example of cluster housing, and I think it would make a great addition to our local register with Villa Monterey, and I think it's very special. So thank you again, Roger.
You're welcome. And I know that the citizens will be pursuing Scottsdale designation as well once we go through the National Register process.
Okay, Commissioner Kinchin.
I was done. Thank you.
So Commissioner Hosmer.
Yeah, Peter Hosmer, Mr. Brever, I commend you on your wonderful presentation here. I have driven by this thing for 30 years or more, well, ever since it was built, never quite realizing how elegant it was. And it certainly is a fine, fine example of what somebody can do for a townhome when they care about their environment and keep something to scale. And for that reason, I think it absolutely justifies the National Register, and I thank you.
Thank you. I'll note that the word elegance is relevant because Eldon Stemgem and his wife were elegant in themselves, and they wanted this piece of real estate to be elegant in every sense of the word. In 1968, what elegant meant, high ceilings, luxury, all of those things we don't often talk about. Elegance is the right word.
That is true. Okay. I agree with Commissioner Kinchin, and I would like to have a motion to send a letter of support for this application to SHPO. Commissioner Hosmer?
I'll make a nomination to support and approve the Scottsdale North Natural Register application.
And to send a letter to SHPO in support?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Kinchin?
I second that motion.
Okay. Roll call?
Chair Schweiger,
Yes.
Commissioner Brousseau,
Yes.
Commissioner Edmonds,
Yes.
Commissioner Hosmer,
Yes.
Commissioner Kinchin.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That brings us to the Kiva Craft Center National Register application.
Doug Sidnor here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So I assume there is no city staff presentation before us?
It is my understanding that for these applications, no.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair Schweiger and Commissioners. Again, this is Doug Sidnor. I'm an architect representing the Kiva Craft Center Rehabilitation Project team. And as before, joining me today and co-presenting is Don Ryden of Ryden Architects, a firm specializing in historic preservation projects. It was Don and his team that were the principal authors of the National Register of Historic Places nomination draft that we will be discussing. Next. The Kiva Craft Center was done in a very timely way where there was this intersection of a creative contemporary Native American artist and a modern experiential architecture, all of which was invaluable at Scottsdale becoming a nationally recognized arts and crafts center in the late 1950s. The gentleman that spearheaded this initiative was Lloyd Kiva New, a Cherokee artist, businessman, educator, and entrepreneur. Next. This is our project team that's been working hard the last number of months. It should also be known that Sunbrella Properties Limited has owned and managed the Kiva Craft Center since 1972, or for almost 50 years. The Simonson's family, third generation, is even now very involved and active in the company in this particular property. Next. The original structures were built in phases from 1955 to 1958 and is approximately 23,000 square feet with mostly one-story structures. Lloyd Kiva New had a vision for gathering a group of fine artists and craftsmen and where the public could observe the making of their crafts. Their studios were dispersed throughout a pleasant collection of structures knitted together by shaded outdoor breezeways and a courtyard, and so as to encourage a casual and relaxed retail experience. It was designed by architect Thomas Stewart Montgomery, who is an architect that is also known for a number of other Scottsdale area and Tempe commercial and religious projects. Next. The existing conditions reflect the ownership respecting the original integrity. It did experience some new site improvements back in 1993, and it was in 2002 that it was placed on the Scottsdale Historic Register. Next. So in recent months, we've been doing a great deal of research on the project. We were always searching for any original colored images that were taken soon after the 1955 phase was completed. It was only recently discovered that in this November 1956 People and Places magazine cover image and article that we in fact found those colors. It was invaluable because until this moment, it was not found. Next. We also dove into a lot of field investigation and some forensics. On the left, we confirmed the original concrete masonry unit wall colors. On the right, you're seeing the exterior window and door frame colors being the off-white, which was invaluable. Next. Also at the exterior wood soffits, through again that magazine cover image, we learned it was a natural wood and received an Olympic stain per the original specs. And on the right is the existing condition. Next. We also noticed in the 1955 specs, it referenced some plastered walls, which really solved a mystery in that there are two of these walls fronting on the Fifth Avenue frontage. And they in fact noted in the specs, they are always to be used as art murals. So we'd like very, very much to bring back an art mural and have them be very influenced by the Lloyd Kiva new image like you see on the right, where it's non-objective, very geometrical, and uses some rich colors. So we look forward to kind of reinterpreting that source as we go forward. Next. We were going to have Don Ryden speak about this specific feature for you. Don?
Sure, thank you. What a wonderful find that we had here. For who knows what reason, this art glass window panel, which was the centerpiece of the Glazinière art studio, has survived, but it has been removed and placed as a shading structure on a side entrance of this same building. And so what we're proposing, because of the extreme cost of restoring such a artifact, is that we protect it, take it down from here, and store it away for a later restoration project. So this is kind of the protection, stabilization, anticipation of this valuable piece of artwork. So that falls in keeping with the treatments proposed by the Secretary of Interior standards. So we look forward to that in years to come.
Next. So there are all these series of breezeways that you find. This is one to the west, there's another to the north. And we've learned that originally these roofs actually connected with a solid element. And there's a part of us that one day would like very much to pay homage to that by bringing back possibly a trellis-like structure that would knit these various building components together. And while doing that, it would shade some of the existing windows on the more severe exposures. On the right, we actually discovered the original door pulls, and we very strongly believe that Charles Lolema probably designed and created these for Lloyd Kiva New, because they did a lot of collaborations at that time with other products that they were creating. Next. This is our proposed exterior building color material sample board. We intend to submit this along with a very full design packet to all of you in just a few days. Along the bottom edge of the existing colors we verified. Across the top are where we're trying very hard to match those where it's appropriate. And so we're very, very pleased with the accuracy of this research and this effort. Next.
1 minute warning.
With time so short, this is our proposed site improvement. I can't begin to dive into it. It'll take too much time. So let's just go next to Don's comments about the nomination. Don, next.
Very good. Thank you, Doug. This presentation is really our request to the Commission for support of our National Register nomination. The Simonson family, as owners and stewards of this community treasure, really want to honor the Kiva Center by listing it on the National Register and preserving it in compliance with Secretary's standards. Next. So we begin with the historic context of Scottsdale in the 50s. It's a context of commerce and contemporary arts, crafts, and fashion. What was going on was a kind of a competitive, complementary tussle between Old West nostalgia and modern sophistication, both as draws for destination tourism. Next, please. Significance of the place is that it is important in commerce as an innovative business model by entrepreneur Lloyd Kiva. It provided experiential shopping and a gathering place, and uniquely, it was a place for producing, purveying, and promoting modern arts and crafts of the Southwest. Next. Its significance in architecture was as an imaginative design by architect Tom Montgomery. It was a showcase, shop, and studio for local crafters like Charles Luloma here, and a modern setting for experiential shopping and events. Next. In terms of integrity, the integrity of architectural design really focuses on the fine preservation state of international style and contemporary style together in an oasis setting. The contempo style conveys modern residential designs, and the international conveys the form simplicity and functional efficiency of this modern approach to architecture. Next. The integrity of materials and workmanship. It's all about post-World War II industrial construction methods and technology. Here you can see that they were actually proud of their air conditioners on the rooftops. They had tempered glass walls and colored concrete floors, stack bond CMU blocks, 2x4 roof decks, projecting beams on posts, and tempered glass. Next, please. The integrity of feeling is centered around the cool comfort and community spirit of the courtyard. The hardscape and the roofs changed, but the modern outdoor-indoor feeling still remains. Like an old Spanish plaza, merchants would serve patrons and community in this kind of a venue. Next. The integrity of association is the fact that the Kiva Center is the heart of Scottsdale's Fifth Avenue shopping district still. At that pivotal intersection, the Kiva Craft Center could draw shoppers off of Fifth Avenue into the courtyard. Its modern facades both contrasted and complemented with the adjacent Old West storefronts. Next, please. So, we find that the Kiva Craft Center is an old, important, real place. And the spirit of that place continues today, much as it was described in that 1956 People and Places magazine. Next, please. So, thank you, Preservation Commission. Please join us in promoting this nomination of the locally designated Kiva Craft Center and ask that it be listed on the National Register by sending to the State Preservation Office your letter of enthusiastic support. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions or comments from the commission? Commissioner Hosmer?
Well, Peter Hosmer, I think it's certainly absolutely worthy. I spent, I don't know how many years going here in the 60s, and it was fabulous. It was the most significant building in all of Fifth Avenue. In fact, for that matter, Scottsdale. I remember the stained glass studios. My brother-in-law worked doing stained glass in there. I remember the perfume. You'd see the fountain. You could smell all the perfumes around there. The Seeger Gallery that did all the acrylics. I just thought that was the most amazing thing. And I bet you I spent 3 or 4 years going here just because it was so fascinating. And I absolutely support and will write a letter in support of this for the National Register. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, you reminded me of that perfumed fountain. I believe the perfumer's name was Ernay. Somewhere I have a bottle of the perfume he made for me. Can I entertain a motion from the commission to write an enthusiastic letter of support to SHPO in support of this application? Okay, I will make the motion. Do I have a second?
Commissioner Edmonds, I second.
Okay, thank you. Roll call?
Chair Schweiger,
Yes.
Commissioner Brousseau,
Yes.
Commissioner Edmonds,
Yes.
Commissioner Hosmer,
Yes.
Commissioner Kinchin.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to regular agenda item 9, Sands North Townhouses National Register application.
Sorry. This is Doris McClay speaking. Chair Schweigert and Planning Commission and Preservation Commission members. Sandra Price, the HOA president, was supposed to be at this meeting, but she hasn't logged on. They weren't planning on doing a presentation. The commission, Sands North Townhomes, was before the commission and was rezoned to the historic property. So the commission is familiar with that property. If you have any questions, I can try to answer some of those questions. Thank you.
Okay, any questions or comments or motions from the commission? Commissioner Hosmer?
Well, this is absolutely another fine example of a scalable project that would not be built today and therefore is worthy of the National Register. So I will support the application and write the letter in support of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Commissioner Kinchin?
I would love to second that motion. This is Commissioner Kinchin.
Thank you. Roll call?
Chair Schweiger,
Yes.
Commissioner Brousseau,
Yes.
Commissioner Edmonds,
Yes.
Commissioner Hosmer,
Yes.
Commissioner Kinchin.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. And that brings us to regular agenda item 10, discussion on the publicity pamphlet on the historic property overlay.
Okay, well, it looks like we've got the brochure up. Thank you so much for getting that up, guys. So we're looking at, I guess we've got slides here. So this would be the first brochure. We're talking about doing, essentially 4, maybe 5. There could be, 1 for each district that could come out consecutively, maybe a month, a month at a time. So the first, neighborhood that we would talk about then would be Town and Country. So you're looking at essentially in the middle, the yellow panel is going to be the back panel of just a very basic trifold brochure. So on the right of your screen will be the front page of the brochure. On the left of your screen is the inside. The idea here was to incorporate points of view from at least 2 commissioners for each one of these brochures. So Commissioner Peter Hosmer would open with some type of a statement about the commission, a broad statement about what we do. And then if I could get to the next slide, please. Then as you open the brochure, we have Christy Kinchin, who gives us her input on what Town and Country is all about. So this brochure then would be Town and Country. There would be another one, for each historic district, and then perhaps even one for, what's coming up next. The idea here would be to have sort of a collectible type of a thing, collect them all type of thing. and really get people jazzed about our wonderful historic, properties here in Scottsdale.
It's looking so good, Ben.
Pretty rough right now, but it's the format is, I think we're getting there for sure. But I didn't have enough time to pull all the right images for this this afternoon. But it's been great to have Christy and Peter in on this and kind of rolling it around together. One thing that we would also like to see on these, and I'm not sure how the city has done this, but I'm only able to find some pretty basic walking maps of these different neighborhoods. Something we could do would be to, do this bird's eye view of each of these neighborhoods and have either an illustrator render out, a handful of the structures that, are striking or similarities in design that would sort of encapsulate, what the walking tour would be about if we're to encourage people to go for a walk. Yeah.
Oh, I think that's a great idea. Are there any other comments from the Commissioner Hosmer?
Yeah, Ben, thanks for putting this together. Did you get the comments that I sent through Doris?
I did not receive those, sorry.
Doris, are you still in the meeting?
Chair Schweigert and Commissioner Hosmer, yes. Sorry, I think I might have forgot to send them to him. I will. And Commissioner Brousseau, did you meet with Kelly Corsett?
Yes, I'd like to update you on that. That was my next point here. Some really fantastic news about our video production team that we actually have a whole crew at the city. I met with Kelly Corsett last week and we discussed, how we go about creating a video series specifically on Scottsdale, on the cultural assets of Scottsdale. So happy to report that Kelly and I are back on the same page. We had actually had a meeting planned for this on, I believe it was like the first day of the lockdown. It was like late March of last year. So it's really great to be back on the same page with him and to get his input. Kelly has been putting together some fantastic content for the city. I mean, it's just some of the stuff that they're putting up right now is definitely award worthy. So I know that we're going to have some fantastic assistance and support in terms of creative from the city. And then also to go back to the graphic design. Obviously, I'm not a graphic designer, but I'm able to sort of lay this out how everybody seems to want it. From here, then Kelly and his team will rebuild this design and make it all work so that we have all the messages that we're trying to get out as a commission, and then we have the thumbs up from the city. So I'm really happy that we're moving forward and thrilled to know that we've got Kelly and everybody at the city behind us on this.
Ben, do you need a motion on this at this time?
No, I don't. No, just really just to kind of update everybody. We're going to move quickly on it, though. This isn't something that you're going to not hear about for another 6 months. I mean, we're going to strike while the iron is hot. Look at all the great content just in tonight's meeting that we could do an episode on each one of these agenda items from tonight. I mean, it's really an exciting time to live in Scottsdale if you're into historic preservation. I'll say that.
So then one of the thoughts that I had was that we need to let the overall community understand that there is historic preservation going on in Scottsdale. And I think one of the things that somebody threw out was if there was something, even if it's just a one piece of paper that's the thickness or the width and length of your water bill that just said, did you know that we have historic preservation in Scottsdale, or something just as a tickler. And then I think if a lot of people knew that if they designated their home, they'd be blown away that they could get HRAR funding. And even though the impetus might be to save money, we'd rather have them register their house. We'd love to give them the money if they register their house and start to consider. And so I'm wondering if the trifold, there could be one that is just an overview of all the districts that were created, because some people probably don't even know that Villa Monterey and Sands and so forth are on there. And then I like the idea that you're going here to break each one of them out, like Town and Country, etc. I think that's great. And I like the idea of the trifold, because you're going to lose the audience if it gets too big. Right. And I think trifold is great. In the presentation that we got tonight, there was a comment, or at least a little clip on there about the general plan that was approved 2001, I believe it was. And it says historical and cultural preservation represents the responsibility of Scottsdale citizens to maintain unique and significant structures for the enjoyment of future generations. And that could be a tagline on, say, the one that shows the overall, all the historic preservation districts.
Sure, absolutely.
They just say, well, it's old. I want a modern contemporary thing. What is this junk? And then when they start to realize with the enthusiasm, with all the postmodern, the contemporary, the, you know, the old Spanish, they'll suddenly realize that all this stuff is significant because it's showing the timetable of Scottsdale as we, you know, pass through time. So
absolutely. Could we go to the first slide there really quickly? I wanted to just show you really quick. Okay, so there's enough room on that back panel, the middle section of this slide, then would have an overview on Town and Country, Villa Monterey, Village Grove, Sands North. It could conceivably take up just that portion of each one of these brochures if you wanted to condense them. But I'm all, you know, I mean, these are so inexpensive to print. And if we can keep them in an easy to access folder for the commissioners, they'll be easy to update as well. So yeah, kind of wanted to keep everything, sort of templated out so that we'd have the basic information on every single flyer, every single brochure across the board, but then they would change a little bit depending on what element of the historic preservation we'd like to talk about, which neighborhoods.
So what is the thought on the distribution of these trifolds?
The first thing the way that I was thinking about this and the way I was designing it was, okay, if you're walking through Scottsdale Fashion Square and you know where the concierge sits down, sort of on the main sort of subterranean level of Fashion Square, I'm seeing it there for sure, where we have all these beautiful brochures. I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's a newer area there where the old entry to the movie theater is or was. There's a wall of brochures and you can see them from the other side of the mall practically, because some of them are so, brilliantly colored, others are not. I see this being that type of a high profile location where people come in and they take their information on Scottsdale and hopefully grab stuff on historic preservation.
Yeah, I guess anywhere somebody would be fatigued and want to sit and take a break and there's something there to grab and read, it'd be a good place to do it. Even seeing what they want to do with the Civic Center.
Sure.
If there was a Lexan panel that flipped down to keep it from getting wet and somebody could say, oh, look at this. They have historic preservation. Flop it up, go sit in the book garden and flip through the brochures.
Right.
Or at the entrance to the library, the entrance to City Hall. There's probably quite a few locations for that.
And then if we do it the right way, it can also be designed so that, Christy could print it on her way to a real estate function, or I could print it on the way to an event, or, if we do this the right way, it doesn't have to be a 4-color, UV coated glossy sheet of paper. It could easily be printed in black and white too. So to be sensitive about, the environment and these types of things, but then also to have the freedom as a commissioner to knock these out when we need them or take them to a special event and update them would be key for me.
Yeah, now the old Scottsdale lasso, Old Town Scottsdale statue, that's just superimposed.
But I just threw in a couple of images. I'm totally open to whatever photos you guys want to use.
I thought I saw that in Carefree. Did somebody? Do you know where the original is located?
This guy is right on the corner of Main Street and Scottsdale Road.
Oh, it's still there?
Yeah, I think they just put him back there.
Oh, okay. But it doesn't have Gilbert Ortega behind it, does it?
Yes.
Oh, that's too bad.
We would take that out. That could easily come out, or we could use an older image, or we'll figure that part out.
Yeah. Good. Well, anyway, we'll have, so you'll come up with another draft of.
Yep, absolutely.
Now, Doris, help me with the appropriate ways to communicate to the other commissioners for information. Like if I wanted to send Ben another phrase or something, Is it just only appropriate for me to send it to you and ask you to send it to him? Should I send it to him directly? Do I need to only do it during commission meetings?
Chair Schweigert and Commissioner Hosmer, you could communicate with Commissioner Brousseau individually. What we want to avoid is any open meeting laws where we're all replying, you're all replying, and then that's a quorum issue. But you can have conversations with individual commission members on this brochure.
Okay, Ben, you certainly can send me drafts and I can send you text or whatever. We can go back and forth, you know, as much.
Great. It's fantastic. We'll start doing that tonight then.
Good.
Chair and commission members, would you want this on the August meeting agenda?
Yes, let's keep going with it. Let's keep up the pace on this one, and we'll have. I should have a final of at least a couple of them by that time.
This is Commissioner Edmonds. I agree. We should take a look at these in August.
Commissioner Kinchin, you have your hands up.
Hi, yes, I have my hands up. Commissioner Kinchin. Ben, I just wanted to thank you for all your hard work on this. And I know the HPC communication plan has been stalled for years. So it's nice to see it actually coming into something that is somewhat tangible. And I think, you know, Scottsdale is going to come out of this, you know, everything we've all been living through as like a destination for heritage tourism. Yeah. And I think if there's a way to get this, you know, approved by, you know, Kelly Corsetto, whoever the powers that would be, we're able to take a look at this by fall. I think it would be great to have at hotels, coffee shops, events, et cetera, like Ben was saying. But I think to even take it a step farther, you know, based on technology and cost saving for the city, would there be a ability to have like digital copies of these with like walking maps, like scan this QR code somewhere in Old Town, you know?
Absolutely, Christy. Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. That's genius for sure. I didn't even want to throw too much at everybody tonight, but you know, from each one of these is a ton of artwork and moving images as well. Today, I went over to take just a couple, see if I could get some decent aerial photos, for instance, of town and country. You can see this slide. It's going to be difficult to get that right angle, you know, to get a sort of a cross section or a view of that neighborhood. But yeah, what's probably even more impactful than a printed brochure would be a really fun, you know, 1-minute video on each one of these little neighborhoods. And since we're all so animated and such hams to begin with, I don't think that'll be a problem, you know, getting that content together.
Since we're all hams to begin with. I also think, again, Commissioner Kinchin, again, maybe it could even be something that's on channel 11, those videos, and even adding something to the water bill insert, like just unique ways where we're already printing and spending the money, but like taking advantage of that. So anyway, that's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
You know, absolutely. One of the things that might be kind of interesting to build up too, as one of our kind of roles is to do education, is maybe we could come up with a historic preservation mini curriculum that could be given to the schools.
Sure.
You know, be it for architecture, for art class. There's a lot of different things. So it's something that bears consideration once, you know, these big tangibles are done that can be part of the program.
I love it. Absolutely.
Okay. Is there anything else, Commissioner Brousseau?
I had a wonderful meeting. You know, I think we're all good. Yeah, everything's on track. I've got the Who We Are video re-edited now, so I'll be sending that out to everybody to take a look at, and we'll have that for review at the next meeting.
Okay, sounds great. Anything else? Okay, that brings us to commissioner announcements. Anybody have any? Okay, I don't see any. Next are future agenda items. So we mentioned one already. Are there any other future agenda items that we want to have discussed?
You know, I just didn't raise my hand here. Can I just jump in?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great, Ben Brousseau. I was just curious to know if we were going to take a look at some of the concerns maybe that may be arising from the development, which we love and we're all in support of for sure. But the buildings that are like, I'm just curious to know, like, what the plan is for that South Scottsdale, just north of McDowell on Scottsdale Road. It looks like there's a new light that's gone in. It's right where Dutch Brothers is, but that whole property there, the old bowling alley, the chiropractor across the street with that wonderful flat top, building. I'm just wondering if that should be something we look at closer or put together a little task force to, do some awareness. I don't know. Every time I drive by there, I just see a lot of encroachment, and I'm just concerned that we're going to lose all that stuff. Does anybody know what's up with that?
Commissioner Hosmer?
I don't know what the impetus is for some of that stuff or where it's going. I certainly would like to know that as well. But I'm wondering I'm curious about how nominations get done, and if it's always an individual or if there's an outreach that we as the commission can go to a specific location and say, we love your building, your home. Can we encourage you to put it on the register? Is that something that a group can do, somebody can do, we can do?
Typically in the past, as I understood it, when Mr. Benker was with the commission, is that he would go and do presentations and reach out to groups, although we offered that if he wanted us to go with, that if we were available, we would. I don't know if Doris has any, or Ms. McClay has any ideas on what she would like to do in that regard.
Well, I think we just
person on. But I'm certainly open to what she feels is best in her role with the city.
Chair Schweigert and commission members, Doris McClay, we can look at, trying to contact different properties and see if they're interested in that. And whenever we get any, I've had a couple calls, Villa Adrian and a couple other neighborhoods might be interested in the historic property preservation process. So we've encouraged that and suggested pre-application meetings to go over the process with them. But we'll continue that.
Doris, at one point there was talk about seeing if we could find a way to waive the fee, because if I understand it correctly, they have to pay for the rezoning fee, which can, depending on the size of the property, be significant.
Chair Schweigert and commission members, it has been waived.
Okay.
There is no, for an historic property rezoning, there is no application fee. There are still costs with the historic preservation plan, and also they have to put up a red herring sign, but the application fee there is no fee for that. So
are there any other future agenda items? Okay, seeing none, I adjourn this meeting. Thank you everyone for attending. There will be no July meeting, and we may have an in-person meeting in August. So see hopefully everyone then. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Have a good night.
Thanks everybody.
Everyone.
Bye.
Good night.